Tell me you're a monster without telling me you're a monster. It was just a couple of days ago, I did a video talking about a guy named TJ Trimble. A guy who at 14 years old would kill two sleeping parents back in 1997 and who would receive a life sentence because of that. TJ Trimble, now 39 years old, just recently went up for a reconsideration basically, or at least he went to court in an effort to see if he could be parole eligible after serving 25 years in prison, and the judge said, nah dog, you're gonna spend at least 40 years in prison before we're even gonna think about allowing you to be parole eligible. It was while sharing that story that I shared my belief in all of this, that basically fuck that guy. He could spend the rest of his life in prison. And of course, there were a lot of people who had a different type of feeling about this. Potentially feeling like maybe everybody deserves a second chance. And how can you sentence a juvenile to life in prison without giving them the chance to have a second chance? The juvenile brain is not fully developed and all of that. Well, today's story is going to definitely test some beliefs in whether or not a juvenile should, in fact, spend the rest of their life in prison. You probably have heard about this story. I definitely want to offer my 2 cents on it. Let's go ahead and meet now 17-year-old Nicholas Kedrowitz. Kedrowitz. That's a very tongue-twisting last name to try to pronounce. Teenager gets century in prison for smothering his toddler siblings to death in 2 separate killings. Does this guy deserve to have a second chance at life? Let me just ask that question first and foremost. 17 years old right now, just got sentenced to a century in prison, 100 years. And to be more specific, he was actually sentenced to 2 separate 50-year sentences that the judge recommended he serve consecutively, not concurrently, meaning running those 2 sentences together, one right after the other. As we get into this, I want you to think to yourself a question that I think to myself. I wonder if the judge sentenced him in such a way to avoid saying life because of the recent laws that have been changed by the U.S. Supreme Court saying that you can no longer sentence a juvenile to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Was this done possibly to avoid allowing this guy to have another chance at life? Do you think the judge did this in an effort to try to avoid allowing this kid right now, and a kid when he did what he did, another chance out here in the world? 50 years from now, human civilization on this planet may not even exist, which is crazy to think about, but 50 years from now, can you imagine this story popping up again, just like TJ Trimble's did, except it hadn't been 50 years for TJ Trimble, it had only been 20-something years. But can you imagine this story popping up and people thinking, you know, the guy's already served 50 years. Jetsons type shit. 50 years from now, what do you think the world's going to be like? Will we still be here, human civilization? Well, if we are, do you think Nicholas Kedrowitz, however you pronounce his last name, potentially could get a reconsideration and maybe another chance at life? Does everybody deserve a second chance? Now, for those of you who have no idea who this guy is or what he did, and just based off of that headline, which is crazy enough, teenager gets century in prison for smothering his toddler siblings, we're talking about 2 of them now, to death in 2 separate killings. We're also not talking about killing one then killing the other. Supposedly, the way this story breaks it down, and I don't even know if they've got the concrete facts, the timeline, but supposedly, you know, this happened months apart. Let's get into this story a little bit more and learn more about this 17-year-old monster. An Indiana teen was sentenced Tuesday to a century in prison for smothering his toddler siblings to death. That's just what the headline of this story said. The defense maintained that defendant Nicholas Kedrowitz, 17, lived with an untreated mental illness and deserved a favorable sentence. But the judge said, nah. Judge Ryan King determined that the convicted teenager showed no remorse. And the judge therefore issued 2 consecutive 50-year sentences for the killing of Kedrowitz's half-sister Desiree McCartney, who was 23 months old, and the defendant's stepbrother Nathaniel Ritz, who was 11 months old. As horrendous and as heinous as this is, I think about a couple of things real quick. They mentioned that it was the defendant's half-sister and the defendant's stepbrother. Okay, half-sister. I was thinking to myself, was this kid adopted? But no, he was some blood to that 23-month-old sister who he suffocated. And then it was his stepbrother, Nathaniel Ritz, 11 months old, who he would also kill, and I believe that was months later. The killings resulted from attacks on separate days, authorities proved at trial. Christina McCartney, Desiree's mother, returned home on May 1st, 2017 to find that the young girl wasn't breathing. The child died 5 days later at Cincinnati Children's Hospital in nearby Ohio. Kedrowitz, then 13, was not accused of wrongdoing at the time. Though he was taken out of the home, they say Nathaniel died on July 21st. He was 13 years old when this happened. It's interesting to me that they waited until he was 17 years old to sentence him. Why did it take 4 years for this to play out? Did they want to really avoid sentencing this dude as a juvenile so that he could potentially get a second chance at life? Maybe let's just keep delaying this for a couple of years until he's old enough, 17 years old right now, to be tried as an adult. Then I think to myself, well, if that's the case, I can't say one way or another if it is or if it isn't. But if that's the case, think about this. Could they have waited until he was 18? And maybe punishment could have been the death penalty? This took place in Indiana. I'm not sure if they have that there. How was he 13 years old when this took place 4 years later before he would be sentenced for this? I also don't understand. They say this Nicholas kid was taken out of the home after the little girl was smothered to death or died. I don't know if then they knew that she had been killed. I'm quite certain they could have figured that out. But they took the kid out of the house, and then they say Nathaniel died on July the 21st. So what, did he come back to the house to do this? Was he visiting? All of a sudden he was visiting, and then the little boy turns up dead. I don't necessarily know how this played out, nor does it even really matter. The story goes on to say authorities eventually came to believe that Kedrowitz smothered Desiree with a towel to set her free to heaven. The story reports. Months later, they accused him of putting a blanket over Nathaniel's head. Kedrowitz reportedly landed on law enforcement radar after his mother said that he had once mutilated a kitten. Another relative described him as having a temper like the Incredible Hulk. Kedrowitz confessed after the Nathaniel, the little boy killing, authorities said. There were several remarks that he made to police about freeing his siblings from some sort of hell, the prosecutor said. That form of hell may have been related to another person living in the home. Christina McCartney told the news, if this 13-year-old child who murdered his infant siblings said that he did so to free them from some sort of a hell, which whatever was going on in his mind or whatever that hell may have been, and the mother said he may have been talking about somebody else living in the house, I don't understand how that doesn't play a little bit more into this story, right? Was there some form of abuse taking place? It certainly sounds like that's plausible. If he was being abused, living in some form of a hell, would that play into whether or not this kid deserves a second chance? Would that play into your belief that, hey, he should be given a second chance? Would that play into some sort of a justification for him being so messed up? You can kind of see why he did what he did. I mean, I don't feel that way. I just asked this, I guess playing devil's advocate or whatever. But seriously, I make no jokes about this. There is nothing to make a joke about with this. Would you feel more compassionate toward this kid if you knew that to be the truth? If that was the facts. The kid was being abused. He was screwed up in the head. He didn't understand what he was doing. Or is the charge just so heinous? Man, you done killed 2 toddlers. You done smothered 2 toddlers to death, mutilating kittens. Your own family saying you got a temper like the Incredible Hulk. Is the charge heinous enough for you to overlook your own feeling of, man, everybody deserves a second chance? I asked that rhetorically. I asked that, I guess, to just really make you think about, does everybody deserve a second chance? Let's go even further with it. Let's forget this story for just 1 second. Think about this. There's 3 young boys right now who are locked up for killing their stepfather, I believe, because they found out that the stepfather was abusing their sister. There's a petition going around right now for those boys to be freed. I think they should be freed. Everybody deserves a second chance until you reach a certain threshold. Bad type of charges, like the worst of the worst. Of course, people are going to feel like, those people definitely, look, hey, let the charge become just more heinous, I guess. The bad charge, nobody's going to feel sorry for that person. Or just let it be as heinous as it is in this Nicholas Kedrowitz's case, in his story. I truly feel like there's not going to be many people who feel pity for this dude. Even if there was more to it. That's my opinion. I could be completely wrong about that. The defendant teenager who was charged as an adult fought the charges. Prosecutors argued he was the person responsible for the 2 deaths, and a jury agreed. In justifying the century-long sentence, the prosecutor emphasized the length of time between the 2 murders. This wasn't some sort of heat of passion, one killing, and then minutes or hours or even days later. The prosecutor said, we're talking about months here. So we think that the consecutive part of the sentence was warranted and appropriate in this circumstance. I think so too. I also think a part of that was to definitely make sure this kid does not fall between the cracks in those changes made to the law about sentencing a juvenile to life. Well, you didn't sentence him to life. You just gave him 2 50-year sentences consecutively. I don't believe there's no fixing this kid. It's crazy to think that his time in prison, boy, it's going to be tough. Hey, we're too dark there. Let's get back. My damn battery died. Sorry about that. I personally don't feel like there's any hope for this kid. A sickening case that is sick enough that nobody's going to really feel any sympathy for him, or at least not many will. No matter what was taking place at the home front, sometimes the charge is just too far gone. The story is just too messed up for the sympathy to really be there. I don't think that there's any hope for this kid whatsoever. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And he's going to die there too, I can imagine. I don't ever see this kid getting out. I don't think he's ever going to have an okay time in prison neither. He will never be able to live down what those charges are. That's my personal belief. He's either going to have to learn how to fight or real quick, because he's probably going to be doing a lot of both. I make no joke saying that. That's my truthful belief in this matter. What went wrong for this kid, who at 13 years old was never coming back? He was too far gone. Will he ever have any support whatsoever while incarcerated? I don't want you to feel sorry for him. I'm literally just poking away at this thing. It's so sickening, it really turns my stomach to think about this. You couldn't even imagine, because you're not this messed up. So none of us could even imagine what it would be like to be in a situation where you're going to live out the rest of your days in prison, fighting for your life. You're going to die there, and you're probably going to do so alone with nobody for something that you did when you were 13 years old. Do you think at this point he regrets it? Well, they said at court he showed no remorse. This kid was rotten to the core at a very young age. And that's pretty sad and sick to think about. I shared this story, as unsettling as it is, especially because of, the TJ Trimble story. I said, I personally feel like the guy should spend the rest of his life in prison. Some charges just hit you different. Hit you all up in the feels. I guarantee you this kid's is going to hit everybody up in the feels. If you don't feel like he deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison, comment down below. Truly let me know how you feel. Let us all know how you feel. Don't be ashamed of it if you don't feel it. If you don't feel like he should. If you feel like this kid could be saved, redeemed, rehabilitated, brought back. He's like the Tin Man. No heart, no soul, it seems like. But if you feel like there could be some hope and there could be some sort of justification because of whatever could have potentially been taking place on the home front, at the home front, let us all know. That's all I got on this story. There's no way you could have enjoyed this, but if you enjoyed hearing me dissect this and offer my opinion on this, please leave a like and a comment letting me know what yours is as well. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted and make the most of every day. Peace!